Hold on for a second. What's up, YouTube family? I would like you guys to make sure you like and subscribe to our video. It would help us get into the algorithms so we can be seen and bring more engaging content to you guys. So like I said, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Appreciate you. And welcome to another edition of the Pick and Downs podcast. I'm your host, per usual, Sean Tyson here with my main man Push, and I said Push, P Bush, and
yeah, I'm pushing T today, guys. You know, I'm just kind of I'm just kidding.
Up on that one. Yeah, man,
we don't got Zoo today.
Yeah, Zoo, has some family issues that he wanted to go through, so prayers to him and make sure he gets through what he's getting through, and me and people are going to hold down the fort. So, with it being fantasy season, I thought we'd get into the running backs this year. And like we were talking about post-pod, running back this year has been very difficult. I just will say from my end of it, I just don't feel like I've ever been in a really good position in any of my mock drafts to feel like I can draft a running back that feels like he should be drafted in that position. So I wanted to start off with a player comparison like we did with quarterbacks. And I feel like this one has been, at least in a lot of the drafts I've been in, these two guys have been drafted kind of around the same position. And if you look at a majority of these, I guess, mock draft sites and these little fantasy pros or Yahoo Sports, a lot of these guys are mocked right beside each other. So I wanted to start off and ask P. Bush, if you had the choice of these two running backs, Jonathan Taylor or Saquon Barkley, who are you picking?
This is tough. I mean, because you look at the ADP and, I'm looking at it right now. So I know I have a couple PPR leagues, right? And I got, standard. I don't have any standards, right? So I kind of avoid talking on the standard front because I think if it's standard, I think it immediately leans Taylor because, Saquon's upside is really his receiving, whereas Jonathan Taylor, he's more of just kind of a bell cow back. Very much like he's obviously not the same type of player, but very much kind of like a Derrick Henry, like non-existent to very minimal use in the passing game. Especially now that they have Anthony Richardson. He's probably just going to run, with his legs rather than check it down. And he always had Naheem Hines, we'd heard that name for these couple of years that kind of took away that third down passing, on 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s when you're not really going to run it with JT. Whereas Saquon, he's made his bread and butter on his receiving game, right? I think, you look at guys like Brian Robinson Jr., I might talk about him a little bit later. Saquon Barkley is, Brian Robinson Jr. showed very good signs of that last year. Well, that's Saquon Barkley. He's like the tier 1 of that. The Zamir Gibbs is up there too. Obviously, CMC is easily tier superior than everybody else. But, man, both of these guys that you just brought up have rushing quarterbacks in the red zone. And I think, we can speak to Jalen Hurts a little bit more than Anthony Richardson because, one, sure, Anthony Richardson might be doing that, but with his injuries from last year being his too aggressive running approach, are they going to try and hold him back? And I know we talked about this last week with kind of trying to value Anthony Richardson. So, I'm actually going to probably lean a little more towards JT here. And once again, I'm going on half-point PPR scoring here. I think most people kind of stick around that area when it comes to setting up their leagues. I just think the weapons that the Eagles have, they have to spread the ball around more. They're not at the level of like the Niners or the Chiefs at, the amount of weapons that they have to, fill the stat sheet and keep everybody happy. But you're talking about AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. You could throw Dallas Goedert in there as well. Yeah. I mean, they got some legit guys that are going to be garnering targets, especially the first two. And they're going to be relying on Saquon a lot. You'd add in Jalen Hurts. They might not have the tush push, as we talked about, Jason Kelce finally retiring, but he's still going to get some red zone opportunities to run the ball, and whether it be a tush push or just, a normal quarterback draw. Anthony Richardson, on the other hand, and JT, Michael Pittman, Adonai Mitchell has actually looked pretty good. I've seen some training camp footage of him.
Some clips, yeah.
But they are a true run-first team. They have the best offensive line in the league by far. Quentin Nelson is probably one of the best offensive linemen in the last 15 years, up there with throwback Joe Thomas, tackle of the Browns back in the day. Quentin Nelson's up there as probably one of the best guards in a long time. So they're going to rely a lot on JT and saving Anthony Richardson. So I'm going to lean JT here. I think he's going to have more touchdown opportunities than Saquon Barkley. And the difference between their receiving, I think, is going to be a little null and void just because Jalen Hurts is going to be looking towards Devontae and A.J. Brown more for that passing rather than Saquon. I'm sure he'll get his, of course, but he's not going to be having a CMC type season. He's just not. So, and we got to see, is he still Saquon Barkley? I mean,
that's the
injury issues past couple of years. It's a new scenery. It's a winning organization, or at least we thought it was last year when they started 10-1 and then they faltered. But, it is still, they're still going to be very much in contention for the NFC Championship game appearance and definitely in the NFC East with the Cowboys still being the Cowboys and, Giants and Commanders kind of staying stagnant. So I am going to lean JT here, but I'm spending at earliest is maybe the 8th pick of the first round. And that's the earliest point. He's usually going 9 or 10 and Saquon's on the turn. So
I see when I first, because I put this question out last week when I was just doing out the, blueprint of how I wanted the topics to go. I was like Saquon all day. But then I started thinking to myself, like, Anthony Richardson, we talked about this last weekend. He only played in 4 games. So in those 4 games, he did demonstrate the ability to pass the ball, but we don't know how much improvement he's made throwing the ball. Yep. So I do think early in the season, they're going to rely on JT a lot. He's coming back healthy. I think he's basically the number 1 back. I don't even know who his backup is. He's the number 1 guy. Yeah.
I don't know.
That means he's getting 90 carries a game if Marlon Mack is the backup. So for me, I switched in my head. I was like, I think I want to lean JT because to all the points you said about Saquon, they're going to be relying on a whole lot, like a bunch of different types of options. And I also did a little research of because I was looking at my past draft, not saying this guy is going to split carries with Saquon, but he could give him a little bit of a, push in the back a little bit. Kenneth Gainwell in terms of him being still with the Eagles, and he's not a bell cow, but he's a guy who they like a lot. He's still on the roster. They might give him carries, and if he takes advantage of those carries and stays healthy, it could become a situation where he's eating to a little bit of Saquon snaps. Now, although last year everybody had a lot of Gainwell hype, and I fell into it because I drafted him late. And we saw what happened when DeAndre Swift got the ball. He pretty much dominated that backfield.
Same thing with Rashad Penny, too. He had that hype.
Same thing, yeah. Oof. For sure. And it was just kind of a dud for both of them. But I will say I think Philly's offense is a little bit more diverse. And I've been hearing some reports, and we're going to be talking about receivers next week. And this is a guy I probably would not draft, but I would just, if you just feel like your team is complete, you want to take a flyer. I've been seeing Johnny Wilson have a lot of red zone targets, and they're saying he's ascending to receiver 4 and 3. So if that becomes the case, and then you're looking at a situation where maybe they're not doing the tush push, but they're maybe just throwing go balls to the 6-7 receiver from Florida State, that may take away opportunities from Saquon. I just feel like with the Indianapolis Colts, they're going to be ground and pound. They're going to be using Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor to basically spearhead their running game, and I think there's going to be way more opportunities for him. Now, this could completely change if AR comes out and he's just throwing dives on the first week. Then,
him and Pittman,
pick whoever. Yeah, they could be going. They have a crazy connection, but I'm leaning more JT because I also think he's going to want a little bit. He's going to have a little bit more to prove. So, I thought that was interesting. I just think JT he's coming back with vengeance, and we forget JT before his injury, he was tearing up the league.
2021, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, he was. What did he yards? Was he ever in consideration for a number 1 pick or no? I don't know if he was.
That's a good question. Running backs just don't usually go first. It's usually, maybe you see an offensive tackle, but it's usually quarterbacks, maybe a wide receiver potentially, and otherwise it's usually defensive ends. I mean, it's usually the ground.
No, I'm talking about in fantasy. Was he ever a number 1? Like a number 1
in fantasy?
Fantasy. Yeah. I don't think he was.
You know what? I don't know. 3 maybe. I don't know where he was in 2022 coming off of his 2021 season. He had to have been top 3, up there with CMC. He probably would have been up there with Christian McCaffrey and maybe Derrick Henry probably at that point. I'd have to look at the 2022 draft, but then he got injured, right? Yeah. So you got screwed if you drafted him. But once again, you can't predict that type of stuff. So
Same thing what you were seeing with CMC. He's sidelined again. I feel like I think he's still in that. I'm taking him regardless. Like until I see torn ACL or like meniscus tear, I'm still taking CMC because I learned my lesson with that. Like even though I never had an option to take him, I've always been like, do I want to?
Especially if Ayuk's gone.
Like, that's something we could talk about next week. If hopefully not hopefully, but maybe a trade happens before that, and we can kind of see him in a new position. But I want to get your thoughts, switching to another topic. On like some running backs that you're a little bit higher on and some running backs you're maybe lower on. And you can go ahead and start with the higher. What's a running back that may go a little bit higher than you think?
I was looking at the ADP listing and I'm kind of trying to do it based on value and where they're going, right? And there was a guy that initially jumped out at me, but I think looking at it a little bit more, he is pretty well valued. I'd say maybe there's like one or two guys I would take behind him, and that's Joe Mixon. I think he's going to have just a bell cow season. I mean, he's 28. Sure. He's, getting into his twilight RB years, as we like to call it, kind of that 28, 29, 30-year-old running backs. But man, this guy, he was not efficient last year in Cincinnati. I mean, but you got to think of why. They had one of the worst offensive lines in the league. It's partially why Joe Burrows got injured, which is the second reason why he didn't have a good season, was because you could just stack the box when Jacob Browning was running that show, right? And he still finished with RB11 purely based on his pass catching and his volume, right? So that's a guy that I was looking. He's at RB15 right now. James Cook, I think, is a little bit ahead of him, and same with Rachaad White. I would put those three kind of in the same tier. So I actually like Rachaad White a lot. I do too. But I also like who's the rookie that they drafted? I forget his name. It's not coming up. But I've been reading reports that he's actually given him not a run for first, running back, but definitely a part of the carries. Yeah. So I decided to shift focus onto a guy I had mentioned earlier. I actually like Brian Robinson Jr. You've talked about the Commanders a lot this year, with your interest in seeing how Jaden Daniels takes off. And once again, this could kind of be a risky pick, right? But not of where he's getting drafted. Right now, I think they have him at RB34. He finished as RB22 last year. Now, the drop in his value is likely due to the Eckler signing. But I don't know about you, Sean, but I am not impressed with what Eckler is going to be doing this year. I mean, he might be productive, he might be fine, but he's not what he was. He has durability issues, he has age issues, and he has speed issues. Whereas
speed issues for sure.
Speed issues for sure. Brian Robinson Jr. showed that he can do the pass catching that they likely brought Eckler in for and lost Antonio Gibson for, right? They were both kind of the pass catching backs that they flopped in and out. But Brian Robinson Jr. showed that he can do that, and he's also 230 pounds.
Pause. Oh.
Can you hear me now, Sean?
Wait,
can you hear me, Sean? Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
something happened. I think
it didn't freeze.
For a second.
It's all good. It's all good. I was just saying that, Brian, he's 230 pounds. I mean, he's not a small running back, right? So he can also get goal line touches and punch it into the end zone. The only thing you have to consider is Jaden Daniels as a rookie going to be taking any of that goal line snaps? But I like him at RB34. I mean, I think he could have an upside. I think he's being drafted as like a potential flex, right? Kind of that RB3, maybe your first running back on the bench. I think his highest upside is like a nice RB2. But if I can get him as a consistent flex play where he's getting me 4 or 5 receptions a game, he's getting me 80 yards and maybe getting a score, that's a good flex to have. So at RB34, I think he's at a very good price. And I think you should kind of set aside the Eckler part, because I do think he's going to truly earn the not full backfield, but a heavy majority of that backfield by midseason. So he could be a nice guy to have on your bench and eventually move him up to the starting positions.
Yeah. Brian Robinson is definitely a RB, like a full load back. Like he can catch out of the backfield. He can do a lot of different things. So I think he's a 3-down back. I don't think he's like a specialist like some of the guys. Like Eckler, I feel like his role now is turning into a guy who is a 3rd-down guy. If Brian Robinson is like winded or like he got maybe injured for a play, he can come in on a 3rd down, catch a little spring pass and get a 1st down. But I think Brian Robinson has demonstrated enough to be a featured back. So I do like where, I mean, he's like you said, what is he, 34? I think on this list they got him at 29, but I mean that's basically around the same area. But for me, I'm looking at more of a guy who it's for some reason, it kind of got lost in like the whole, I guess, running back frenzy where guys getting in on different teams, except for if you're in the NFC North. And that's Aaron Jones.
Mm-hmm.
He's always had an issue with being healthy. So I'm a little hesitant because his frame is very slender. And I just feel like when you're in that NFC North and you're outside and you run around and it's 15 degrees, like it's just you're prone to more injury.
Yep.
So him being on a fast track in Minnesota, him being motivated, and I'm gonna be honest, I've been reading conflicting reports online about the quarterback. Like, I'm pretty sure JJ is gonna be the starter, but I've been reading like Sam Darnold's have good days, so they keep saying that. So I'm like, are they really gonna start the season with Sam Darnold, which is just gonna be incredible if they do?
I think
that is gonna signal to me like they might run the ball. Yep. So to me, it's like if they run the ball, I think Aaron Jones. Not saying he's a 3-down back, but he's gonna get a lot of carries, and if he gets a lot of carries, I kind of like his explosive ability. Now, Jordan Addison, if he comes back and he's not having a bunch of legal trouble, he's a nice option. Justin Jefferson, we know who he is. It's Hawkinson's, right? Hawkinson, he's still there. If he is able to continue what he had going on last year, I like that offense being a spread it out, quick, fast, in a hurry, toss, sweep plays, whatever, to get Aaron Jones involved. He's a great pass. He's a good pass catcher. I like him, especially where his value is, because I think they had him, at least on this list, they had him at like tier 4, which is like, I think running back 18. Running back 18. So he's like right below Kenneth Walker.
Yep. Right before like James Conner.
Are you muted? I think I can't hear you. Hold on.
Can you hear me?
Wait. Yeah, I can hear you now. For some reason, the tab was muted. But I think that was me that did that. My bad. But I mean, Kenneth Walker is my dude. I like him a lot. He's got a lot of competition, so I'm not too sure about him. But Aaron Jones, I think, with just his explosive ability and that offense having to lean on him, I kind of like where he's at. Like, he could end up being a high-end RB2. Like, I don't think he'd be an RB1, but he can be a high-end RB2. And if you can get him,
he could have I don't
know what round.
Top 13 finish, being drafted as the 18th RB. That's a good season.
Yeah, I think he has the potential to do something like that. So I'm pretty high on him as long as he can stay healthy. But I just want to get this out of the way.
Your overvalue, I should say.
This is probably not even an overvalue. I'm just, when I was doing the research, just going through names, I am totally out on Najee Harris. I don't want any shares of him on any league. None. I don't want to touch him. Like, I think he's having a trajectory. Not this year. I don't think this year he's going to have a trajectory of where he's just completely unplayable. But it feels like he's trending to how like Zeke trended in Dallas.
I got a better one for you. You ready?
What?
Trent Richardson.
Oh, that hurts.
Great first couple years.
Yeah.
And just
shot down. Yeah.
Yes.
His style is just too lumbery. Like, he's not. It feels more, and take this for a grain of salt because I'm not an NFL player, but it feels more fullback-ish. Like, it feels like he's a inside the 20 on a toss, like a sweep where he could bruise his way into the end zone or like a goal line situation. But Jaylen Warren is just so much more of a complete back. And I don't know what the Steelers have as like their depth chart, if he's number 1 or number 2, but it just feels like it's Jaylen Warren's job. He's so much more explosive. He can catch the football. I just love everything about his game. So if I'm a guy who's drafting, I'm not touching Najee Harris. Like, I don't care. I mean, what's his ADP? Because on this list, they have him as like a.
Let's see, I got him at
25,
24, and then Jaylen Warren is 28. I got that.
So Najee's 24?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's
in the ESPN too. This is Fantasy Pros, by the way. That I have
that's what I'm looking at.
For half point PPR.
I think I'm on full point PPR, but it's not too much different. Like, I'm just Najee Harris. I'm out. You can have him. You can have him.
And as we know, I mean, you want to talk about conflicting reports on quarterbacks. Like you were talking about the Vikings, Steelers, man.
Yeah, y'all might get a 4th round pick. Yeah, I might get a 4th round pick.
I tried to tell you, man. I tried to tell you guys.
I might get a 4th round pick.
That makes it an unbelievable trade. But when you have Caleb Williams in your back pocket, sure, of course.
Yeah, you're good.
Don't worry, guys. Well, I'll get to my Bears in a couple weeks. We'll talk about that. But I totally agree with you on Najee. Like you also got to take into account that he's kind of a bruised up guy too. Jalen Warren's a bit more of the fresher guy. I would argue that it's kind of the flip of Brian Robinson and Eckler.
Yeah.
I mean, Jalen Warren is really more like the Austin Eckler guy, and Najee's a bit more like Brian Robinson, but they're just flipping, right? And who's kind of maybe trending towards getting the majority of the carries. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a more 60-40, split in favor of Warren by midseason. And obviously, once again, we have to caveat all of this with injuries, right? No one can predict that. But if there is a guy that I would bet on in the Steelers' backfield to get an injury, it's probably Najee Harris because he's more of the bruiser. And Fields loves checking down to his running backs. Or should I say he needs to do that instead of just trying to, throw the ball or whatever. Russell Wilson, we'll see what he ends up doing if he is the starter on day one. But yeah, I'm very high on Jalen Warren this year, which I think automatically puts me lower on Najee Harris. So I completely agree with you. But
yeah,
I'm going to go with a guy that I'm not completely out on, but I think he's not overhyped. He's going to have a good year. But I can't draft him where he is at, and I'd rather take the two guys around him, and I already mentioned two of them. And that's the guy I think is overvalued is James Cook. He's at RB 13. He's at RB 13-14 right now. He's sandwiched in between Rachaad White and Joe Mixon. I mean, I'm taking both of the – like Rachaad White has a hot – I think he will have more of an impact on that team than James Cook will. And then Joe Mixon, I just think he has no competition – for like Stroud's not a runner, right? Joe Mixon, he's going to be the bell cow if he can stay healthy.
For sure.
Now, he has a hamstring issue, so we got to monitor that. But James Cook, man, it really comes down to his touchdown. He's not going to score. And, I've also seen people throwing around the fact that Zamir Gibbs could be a little bit overvalued this year because he's going to be losing out on a lot of red zone opportunities. So it's not that I think he's going to have a bad year. James Cook could easily have 60 to 65 receptions. He could rush for 1,100 yards and have, 500-600 yards catch, or receiving, but he might only have 4 or 5 touchdowns. It gives me very much Alvin Kamara of last year vibes. He only had 5 touchdowns, but he still had a good year, but you can't rely on him to be your RB1. And to your point, Sean, sure, you get down to RB 13. You should have at least taken one running back at that point. But if you are the guy that's taken wide receiver, first 2 rounds because you see the value there depending on your league's scoring. If you're left with James Cook being your RB1, sure, you might be fine, but you damn better well be taking, a James Conner, a David Montgomery, a true touchdown-dependent guy that can score in the red zone as your RB2. So you need to go like 3rd, 4th round, like RB. So I think it's not that I think he's going to have a bad year. I'll reiterate that till I die. I just think Josh Allen, we've talked about this. Vegas has him at like 12 rushing touchdowns. I mean, most running backs don't even come close to 12 rushing touchdowns unless you're CMC or Mostert, right? So I mean, or Jamal Williams is another one. But once again, those guys are bruisers, and James Cook isn't. So he doesn't have too much competition up there, which is good. But he does.
I will say
where it counts, and that's Josh Allen.
I will say everybody knows I went to the University of South Carolina.
Ray Davis?
Ray Davis is a 5'8", 220, 225. He's a bowling ball, and
exactly.
It kind of gives off that he might be like a not a goal line back, but no, that's another guy. I'm completely off. I'll never draft again. Like I drafted him 2 years in a row and just thought the goal line factor was going to come into play, and it just he's good at getting you. Let's just say 45 yards and a half a touchdown if he even gets
on like 15 carries. Yeah,
for real. It's just.
The Ray Davis is a great point. I meant to bring him up too.
He's a guy like we all think Josh Allen's going to be the goal line back. Yeah, but I don't know. Ray Davis was good in college. He was really good, and I think a lot of people didn't really talk about him because he played in Kentucky. But in that weather, and he feels like he fits that team. So if he gets any type of momentum, he could be a guy that's coming in for James in that goal line package. And if they're trying to conserve Josh, Ray Davis could be a touchdown monster. So James Cook, I like him as a player, but to your point, he's kind of he's a to me, I like him as a flex. I don't really even like him as like an RB2. Like I don't think he gets enough. He scores enough.
I mean, you're talking about, because really, we can talk about this in general because we won't really touch running backs again specifically, but outside of Christian McCaffrey through Saquon, that's kind of your first rounders. Then you got Gibbs, Kyron, Etienne, Henry, Achane, Pacheco. Those are kind of the next tier. Once you get into that Josh Jacobs, White, Cook, and Mixon and Kenneth Walker, you're kind of really starting to stretch if you haven't focused running back. So I think it depends on your draft strategy. If you go running back first round and you can get James Cook in the third round and maybe get like a Garrett Wilson in the second, then maybe we'd be talking, because you're talking about having a very late third round pick, and then you'll have a quick turn on the fourth to draft another running back like an Aaron Jones, to your point earlier, or a James Conner, David Montgomery. So he's just in that no man's land of RB where it starts to get a little eerie when
he's a poor man's like
Alvin.
I feel like James Cook, Alvin Kamara is what I was gonna say. Yep. I just feel like some people, and I've seen guys that do the draft stuff, they do that 365, and they talk a lot about James Cook because his skill set is similar to Alvin. I just think Alvin was better at producing actual touchdowns. Like,
yes. He's a better
route
runner.
James Cook doesn't feel like, James Cook is similar, but he just ain't producing the output.
I would actually argue that the closest player to Alvin Kamara was probably actually Aaron Jones. Like, he's a very good receiver. When he had Aaron Rodgers, they would line him up in the slot. I mean, remember when they didn't have a wide receiver with Rodgers last year? I kept saying, put him as a wide receiver because he literally will get you more production out there than the rookies that are now looking pretty good up there.
They are.
But at that time, he's a good receiver. It's him and Kamara on that. Which, funny enough, just wanted to play. Kamara's never had a 1,000-yard season. I'm pretty sure he's never had a 1,000-yard rushing season. Rushing. But he's combined for like 1,400 plus scrimmage yards like every season of his career.
Well, if you watch Alvin Kamara's because he was the guy who went to Bama. He might have been behind Derrick Henry, and then he ended up transferring to Tennessee.
Yes.
His high school film is if he would have just focused on being like maybe a slot receiver, he could have been an elite slot receiver. He was just overall better. He could do everything as a slot receiver as a back. Yeah. So he and he was explosive out the backfield. So it's a little different versus coming off the line as a receiver. But he had the skill set. If say he went to Bama and focused on being a receiver, he could have been a really good receiver because he's really shifty. I like his skill set a lot. But we're going to be going into our next topic, which is basically another comparison. Shout out to P-Bush. He thought of this when we was going through our notes, and I thought it was pretty interesting. And going about, let's just say I don't know what rounds these guys are going, but if you had your choice between Zamir White or James Conner, who are you going with? And P-Bush, I kind of have a feeling where I know you're going to go with this, but I want to hear your answer.
Yeah, they're right now, Conner's at around ADP 20, and Zamir's a couple beyond him, with the guys in between being a guy I absolutely hate this year, and Ramondre Stevenson. And the guy I can't hate on, but I still don't think he's going to be as productive, and that's DeAndre Swift. I'd say from Conner, Ramondre, Swift, and Zamir, those are kind of like the last true RB1s that you can kind of rely on. Ramondre being the lowest end of those four for me.
For sure.
But after Zamir White is, once again, when things start getting eerie and you're trying to decide, do I touch Tony Pollard and Najee Harris, Tyjae Spears and Jalen Warren as my RB2?
Yeah.
Because maybe you drafted Josh Allen early on, or you drafted Laporta or Kelsey, and you kind of value, because that's really what it comes down to. You're getting to the eerie points of RBs down that way if you took a high-end tight end or quarterback, right? That's kind of where, and hey, if you have Josh Allen, more power to you, because you should draft him. And Trey McBride's another guy that I would be drafting this year, but we'll talk about McBride probably next week. Looking at James Conner, Jesus, man, since he's been on the Cardinals, I think I've read he's been RB 9, 11, and 13 overall. And you got to remember, last year he missed 3-4 games, and he still finished as RB 13. It's because he's a monster in the red zone. Take it with a grain of salt, because they were absolutely trash at quarterback last year, right? They ended up having Josh Dobbs. They traded front, right? Because he was he with the Cardinals first and then Minnesota, or was it vice versa? I always forget. But either way, they had really very messy quarterback play, so they kind of had to rely on James Conner, and he did win me a league in the flex position because of that. But here's a guy, once again, a little bit of durability questions, a little bit of when is he finally going to bust, because of his RB age. Can you rely on his touchdown dependency? And I think the Cardinals are shifting a little bit by drafting Trey Benson. Maybe there will be a change, bit of mentorship there, and eventually, I would say even if Connor loses 30 to 35% of carries, I don't think he's going to have the seasons that he's had the past 3. Add on top of that you're getting Kyler with MHJ and Trey McBride, they're shifting towards a pass first offense, right? Now, on the flip side, you look at Zamir White, they're kind of at the beginning stage of where the Cardinals were last year with Aiden O'Connell at quarterback. And Zamir White, I mean, you got to remember, he was a top 10 RB in the last 4 weeks of last season when he got the starting job over Josh Jacobs. And it convinced the
Raiders. That's why Josh Jacobs is gone.
It convinced them to buy into Zamir White over keeping Josh Jacobs. Now, obviously, one that was a future money issue. You don't want to sign Josh Jacobs. You pretty much have Zamir White for absolutely nothing. And he showed that he can be a bell cow back and give you 20 carries and 100 yards and get a score, or at least get you in the red zone. And one, they didn't target an RB in the draft. Or did they? Maybe later on. But pretty much he doesn't have true competition in the backfield. And you need, if you want to help Aiden O'Connell to get the ball to Devontae and Brock Bowers, you have to get Zamir White going. You have to get the defense respecting your run game to relieve pressure off of Aiden O'Connell. And then you take into account that, is Aiden O'Connell going to be this absolute gunslinger in the red zone? Probably not. Maybe he'll take a step this year with Devontae and Brock Bowers, but I think they're going to rely a lot on Zamir White in the red zone. So I'm going to lean Zamir White here. I think you can get a little bit more value, and you could probably get him an extra 8 to 10 picks after James Conner, with every other position being thrown in between, not just running backs. And you could get a good value play there, and that might be your third running back if you're drafting well. And how thin running back is and how deep wide receiver is. If you can get him as your third running back and have him either as a good bye week play in or have him as your flex, my God, you are sitting pretty. And if not, you can use him as a trade piece. So he's a true RB1. I think he's actually probably the latest running back drafted that could garner a high-end wide receiver, a high-end running back 2 position by the end of the year. And he's going at what, RB? 23.
Yeah, so, he's 22 on this list. Yeah, he's in between like Montgomery, Swift, Warren.
Yep. If you're in a 10-man league and every person has taken 2 running backs, and that's your top 20, and you're on the front end of getting your third running back, that's a good option to have over a guy like even a Jaylen Warren. I would easily take Zamir White over Jaylen Warren, even though I'm very high on Jaylen. I just think Zamir is going to garner way more touches.
Like, honestly, like the guys he's like close to, like to your point, I'm picking Zamir White over James Conner. I'd rather have Zamir White than DeAndre Swift, Jaylen Warren, Najee Harris. I mean, Mozart, you can maybe, I don't know, he is getting older, but Mozart went so crazy last year.
The only one is if you can get Chubb and he comes back healthy. But you could take Zamir and probably still get Chubb. You know what I mean?
For sure.
So if you want to, and that's what I would do. If Zamir's your third running back and you don't want to draft running backs the rest of the draft, but you want to just pick up Nick Chubb in case, I think that's fine. You have 4 running backs with one being a potential RB1 upside in Nick Chubb. Like, man.
Listen, his backup, I was just looking for Zamir White, Alexander Madison. And
that's
Amir
right.
Abdullah.
That's who they brought in. Oh, my God.
He is the RB1 for them. So, it's not even a competition.
No.
But I'm with you. Zamir White I'm getting nervous because I feel like the word's going to start getting out on him and he might get drafted a little bit higher.
Yeah, Sean, just cut this part out. We'll use the next comparison.
This is not going out on social. But, Zamir White is a dude. And if you know anything about Georgia running backs, they usually hit. And he has the build of a true RB, like, 1. The only thing that is nerve-wracking about him is I don't know how good he is catching the ball at the backfield. I don't think that's a part of his skill set. So that may limit him in terms of, like, maybe little swing passes to maybe help out those quarterbacks that could be Gardner Minshew. It could be Aiden O'Connell. But if we're getting inside the 20, I feel like with Antonio Pierce and his philosophy, it's going to be a lot of just pounding the rock and trying to get, easy yardage and helping out the young quarterbacks.
Absolutely.
And maybe occasionally he'll throw a fade to Devontae because it's just you got to keep your receiver happy. But Zamir's going to get a lot of work. So to your point, if you need an RB2, RB3, yeah, I'm all the way with him because I also, like you said, I'm the same thing you said about Connor. The touchdown rate, like the amount of touchdowns he's been amassing over these years, like that's not sustainable. Like I know he's done it for the last 3 years, but it's just like at some point that just has to stop. Like him just scoring, because that's really been his value. He's just always figuring out how to get a touchdown or two a game. So it's like
eventually being healthy, that could take away some too.
I think with the shift of philosophy and them spending I want to say what in the third, I think it was a third round pick on Trey Benson.
Yep.
That means we're looking at not changing of the guard, but there's going to be probably in week 8, 9, maybe they may be splitting. You know what this is similar to? When the Jets drafted Breece Hall, and who was the guy in front of him? It was God, I can't remember that back. But everybody was like, "Oh, he's the number one. He's the guy." And everybody and most people were like, "I don't know, Breece. Breece might come in and start splitting carries."
What was Breece Hall's draft year? That's what I'm wondering.
2 years ago,
2022.
So 2022. Yeah, because he got hurt his rookie year. And then he came back his second year. I don't know what day he came back, but he actually came back fast.
I'm trying to think. I know once we hear the name, we're going to be like, oh, yeah, that was it. But it wasn't.
Because I think
Michael
they paid
Carter
him too. Michael Carter. Yeah. He was the UNC back. He was the UNC back.
Yeah.
And they were high because they drafted him a couple years before.
They were going to split.
Like, he's the dude. Yeah. And then Breece just said there's no such thing as a split. I'm the bell cow.
And then he gets hurt. Yeah.
Yeah. He would, if he never got hurt, I think he would be in competition with McCaffrey being the number one overall back. Well, I think with him getting hurt, people are a little still.
Let me just tell you here, Sean, this is interesting because that year Breece Hall only played in 7 games, but he only started 2 games to Michael Carter's 16 total games played, 10 games started. And Breece Hall still had 60 more total yards and 1 more touchdown than Michael Carter did. So I mean, to your point, I don't think there's going to be that big of a takeover from James Conner.
Trey
but he's nice.
I think, like I said, week 8 or 9, I was like, maybe you'll start seeing like a shift in like, okay, they're going to start feeding him more because I don't think he's going to come out as a rookie and just tear it up like how Breece was doing, maybe in preseason camp, and they were just kind of feeding or like pushing him along, but. Trey is like he's like 6'6", 6'1", 210, 215, 4'3" He can catch. Like you want to talk about a bell cow? Like if you go watch this, he was doing kick return. Like, and that says something about him as a running back because I know you're gonna put your most explosive backs back there, but like kick returns are usually set for like receivers, slot guys, like guys who are just like
the only one I can think of is Cordero.
Yeah, and he's like 6'3". He was I guess a former receiver. He's just an athlete. But yeah, Trey's a dude. So I'm almost wondering how he's doing in camp and if they just start to feature him. Like I'm not drafting Trey. Like it's probably like a last pick scenario. And if you want to take a chance, maybe to round up above that. But I'm all in on Zamir White. I like him a lot. I think he's gonna be a bell cow for them. And even though he can't really catch, who cares? I think Antonio Pierce is gonna be running him like, probably 20, 25 carries a game, and that's good enough for me. Yep. So he does have the potential to be an RB2-ish, high RB2. So and this last one, like I said, I was telling people I thought of this like an hour before the pod, but who are you higher on? Like, or not higher on, who do you think was going to have a more, I guess, explosive season? Like they could be like the highs and the lows of it.
The ceilings.
Yeah. Devon Achane or Kamara? Because I think my first instinct on it was Achane, but like I still think Kamara is so like he's still not he had a good year last year, and he was suspended for 4 games. So like,
But the other thing to keep in mind there is, didn't Kendra Miller get hurt last year?
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure he missed time, kind of like Keaton Mitchell. I don't know if he had that severe event. Either way. I think Kendra Miller is going to take a little bit away from Kamara, and I am
more concerned
about Kamara's age.
And he is older.
Now you could argue that Mostert is still in Miami.
Yeah, man.
And
he went crazy last year.
And you know what's crazy is you want to talk about the difference in ADP between,
and that's why I've asked it.
Devon Achane is at RB10. They have Mostert down at RB25. I mean, that's a huge drop off. Now, once again, I mean, how old is Mostert? He's what, 31?
30,
I'm looking right now. He's
32.
32. He's 32. That's a little concerning. He's not Frank Gore. Okay. Frank Gore.
Is Achane going to be a bell cow for them? That's what concerned me. Is he a 3-down back?
You know what? I see him being drafted very similarly to Jahmyr Gibbs. It's the same reason of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery.
That might have been a better question.
Achane, and I think I would go, if you're going to pose that one, I think I'd still go Jahmyr Gibbs just because their offense. Now, granted, the Dolphins' offense is unbelievable too, but they have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle.
Yeah.
And they picked up Odell too. Not that he's Odell Beckham that we saw 10 years ago, but it's still, that's still 3 great wide receivers, and you're still talking about having Mostert in the backfield. But, with Kamara, I think it's just the age concern, and I hate to say it, but Derek Carr, man. I mean, I know he had him last year, and that's fine. But losing Michael Thomas, I mean, it could increase his targets, but they're also saying Rashid Shaheed has been looking really good as their wide receiver too, and he could be garnering more targets. So I think I'm going to go Achane for ceiling upside. If I'm playing it safe, probably Kamara. I don't want to be honest, I don't want to draft Achane. I would rather see him another year. I need to see him.
I got to see him be because to me, if he's going, what do you say? He's at 10. Like that's telling me I need you to be on the field down. And that's the thing with Kamara. That's why I asked it, because Kamara, I feel like, can do 3 downs. Like we've kind of seen he's gotten.
I would say a better one is, would you rather have Achane or Pacheco?
Achane, because I think with Pacheco, he is growing into more of a, I'm kind of almost arguing my point that I made last week about Patrick Mahomes. Like, I don't think Patrick Mahomes is going to be hitting 40 to 45 touchdowns this year, and it's going to be because of Pacheco. But I also think too, Cincinnati sometimes gets really creative in like goal lines and stuff like that, like little pop passes to Kelsey, or little reverses with receivers. Like, they get creative. So I almost wonder, are they going to turn into a Pacheco getting 25 carries a game? I still don't see that with Kelsey being on the field, and then if Xavier Worthy turns up, I just don't think the opportunity's there. I do think Mike McDaniel. I see, the thing is with Achane and Mike McDaniel, I do think, because he comes from the Shanahan tree, like they do run the ball. I just think so. I think the opportunity will be there. I just don't know how much Achane is running. Like, I think because Mostert, I keep messing up his last name, but you see with the stats he put up last year, they like to run the ball. Yeah. So like, I kind of think it makes sense with him because he's a back that's built for it. I just don't know if Achane is I don't think he's getting 20 carries a game. I just don't. So to me, if he's getting 15 to 12, he has to break off big runs. And to your point,
which is what he did.
Yeah, he did. He could do it. It's just, I was leaning more Kamara because I just feel like he's going to get more carries. And I feel like too with the Saints, I know they have Olave, but I also think too, man, it's him, or I know the Rashid, like there's other guys that could maybe step up, but I just think he's another like thing with James Conner. Like James Conner, is going to get touchdowns. I just feel like with Kamara, he's going to get touches. He's a good overall, like all around back. So it kind of makes me feel like it's a safer. Like honestly, if say for instance, like if this is flex, if both of these guys are a flex, I need these guys for a flex, which probably wouldn't happen. But if they're both available for a flex, I'm taking Achane. Yes. But if it's like I need RB2.
Well, that's the thing, Sean. I don't think you're going to run into the issue of deciding between the two in the draft. Now, you might be posed with the Achane Pacheco and say, do I want one of these two guys as my RB2, or do I draft Mike Evans and then wait?
I'm drafting Mike Evans.
And then wait and take Kamara the next round. That's a genuine. I would say it's hard to compare them directly, but I think
because they're far.
Do you see the value in taking Achane or Pacheco, whichever one, that high, or do you wait and taking a wide receiver in the late second or third, early third round, and see if Kamara's there in the fourth. If you can get Kamara in the fourth round and you already have a stud running back, like one of the top 3 or JT Saquon, even Kyron, I would throw Kyron in there. I'm a little hesitant on Henry and Etienne this year. I know we're not going to dive into all that, but there are a couple guys that I want to see them. So I think it's just we're bouncing between all these backs because no one knows. And that's the whole point of running back this year is it's extremely difficult to not only get these players because people are up drafting them, but some leagues are down drafting them and focusing wide receiver, but also like, what do you believe their value? Like, is Kyron Williams a top 11 pick? Maybe, but the Rams are projected to have a top 8 offense, so it's like, all of this is based on where the offense is trending. Right. And, that's why CMC, Bijan, and Brees are all at the top. Same with Saquon and JT. But then you get into, the Josh Jacobs, right? All those guys. I just think the middling is really sad this year. And it's going to screw over a lot of leagues this year.
Yeah, it's running back is almost impossible this year because if you don't have the luxury of getting those top 3 guys.
Yeah.
Because if we had this conversation after like week 7 or 8 of last year, we would be like,
Etienne's top 5 pick.
Yeah. And then it's just kind of like now everybody's cooled on him. But yeah, it's all this.
He might have a great year.
And I mean, Trevor coming back, of course, because he got his big deal, and then they got more options at receiver. So like maybe that opens up the running game a little bit more. But yeah, it's like I just all those guys I feel like are interchangeable. Like I was just thinking of Achane and Kamara because they are far away and I guess you would say like ADP or whatever. But when you brought up just would you rather Achane or Mike Evans and Kamara like the fourth? I'm taking Mike Evans and Kamara. Right. Mike Evans is just kind of a guaranteed. You're gonna be good. Most people,
and you can still get a quality RB2 in Kamara.
Yeah. More times than not, if you got Mike Evans on your team, you're more likely winning more games than not because he's just always a bailout.
I think people are seeing red with just that 200-yard performance by Achane, and they're like, he's just going to be that RB2.
And the coach too.
The coach too. It's the coach. It's Mike McDaniel. He's the wizard. He gets guys open. It just scares me because of how good of a year. Unless Mostert has a Zeke year where he just falls off completely, it just you don't have a year like that, and then all of a sudden you just are not good anymore. So I feel like they're going to be splitting a lot. If they're going to be splitting, and that's why I asked it because I feel like he'll be splitting more, and I think Alvin Kamara will get more carries. But like I said, most people are going to chant.
If Mostert's healthy all year, I think it equates Achane and Kamara's value. But it's really if Mostert can play all 17 games, or even if he misses one game, that's fine. But I guess we only really care about the first 14 weeks. But but it doesn't matter. At that point, players are sitting, right? Things like that. So yeah, I don't know. My head has been spinning over. I feel like and I think you said this. I'm very confident at my wide receiver analyses. Yeah, it's harder for me to tell with running back because of all the handcuffs, the ages, and the newcomers who have not done it twice or 3 times yet. Yeah. And I think that's like your Pacheco's, your Devon Achane's, your Kyron Williams, even James Cook I would throw in there. You could toss Rashad White there too. There's plenty of guys that I need to see them do it again, which maybe that's why you drafted James Conner. Maybe that's why you draft a Mostert or, the guys that you might want on your bench, even a David Montgomery in that discussion too. Montgomery has every year of his career, Montgomery has had 1,100 plus scrimmage yards and at least 6 touchdowns. That's a good flex. That's a great flex to have.
And it says something that with where they drafted Gibbs, they still stuck with Montgomery and let him be the bell cow.
That's how good he is.
He got drafted in the first round, and it was not just like a late round pick. He got drafted high. So it's like you would think they were going to maybe shift and be like, okay, this is Gibbs' team. But Montgomery was still old reliable, and he was the one going. Listen, the amount of times Montgomery started coming in for those goal line carries, you just knew that was what they were going to do. It's the same thing with what was it, the year when
Jamal Williams did it to Kamara.
Yeah. Just about to bring that up, and it's just so you just never know. This is why we're giving you guys this running back preview. Hopefully, you guys have made it this far into the pod, and you're maybe taking some notes and figuring it out. Oh, I take that back. Guys who are in my 14-man league, I hope you guys didn't get this far in the podcast because you guys are going to steal some stuff from me. But like I said, running back is going to be a crapshoot. So I hope you guys, like I said, watch the pod and get some information and see if you can do one in your own draft. So make sure you guys are tuning into bullheaded_pod or not bullheaded_pod, Tyson's Talks on Instagram. I'm putting up playing comparisons right now with running backs and quarterbacks, receivers. Might even do some tight end previews of just like who would you rather draft, things like that, just to pass the time and show that fantasy season is here. Make sure you're also tuning into our YouTube, Quantro Knows. Got all type of things that I'm doing on there. I'm doing polls. I'm posting different types of things with video, breaking down different things with our upcoming content and our, I might try to put together a little series or a little compilation video for people maybe the week before they start actually drafting their fantasy stuff to see and get some last minute details. So I'm trying to cook some of that up. But make sure you're tuning into our Quantro Knows page on YouTube and Spotify, Apple Podcasts is where you can listen to this medium. And for me, Zoo and P. Bush, we are out.